Hello and welcome. More 1v1 action on the way right now. Vaempyress and Jim Bob squaring off in the casuals bracket of the winter 1v1 tournament. We're getting right towards the sharp end of the tournament now. So only a couple of games before our players might just find themselves in the finals. We have a fairly generous map for me and Philothanic to talk about here. What do you make of this, Phil?
There's a scientist spot right down here to the southeast of the colony. I'd take it sometime in the next 10k for sure. High steel, high glass, high
There it is.
food in there. Vaempyress goes and takes it. The question is, for 26k debt, that seems quite reasonable.
Yes, so much money to be made on World. With the steel price, with the food price, with the chem price. It's also a chem colony. The glass price as well. Everything starting high. So no problem at all, I don't think, to take that large amount of debt. And especially with the low power price as well, that makes that debt much less significant than it would otherwise be. Jim Bob, a little bit of a slower start.
Yeah, it looks like he wanted the scientist spot and was a bit surprised when it went for 26k, taking a little bit to found as this robot.
Yep, so we'll see which of our players gets to HQ2 first. Vaempyress is quite considerably ahead. She's going to be there very, very shortly indeed. And she did actually buy up a bunch of iron. Really sensible from Vaempyress to do that, make that really, really difficult for Jim Bob to make any money whatsoever from the steel. And Jim Bob's going to have to wait all of that time. In fact, Vaempyress selling down now that Jim Bob has the iron mine online. But Vaempyress is away and gone. She's at HQ2, and she's going to get 2 farms down. And guess what? Farms are at $140. They are really, really profitable. So Vaempyress off to a flyer.
Yeah, farms are very profitable. They'll be 71.
The black market is open
I
for
guess
business.
A robotics HQ
curious why she
one
didn't.
more claim.
Yeah, what's she gonna do
Yeah.
with that claim? She didn't connect these farms to her base, but
It
aluminum
has to be,
is getting
doesn't it?
high.
Oh,
Oh,
she's
she's
going
going
for a
for-
third farm. Interesting.
Go aluminum this one. I mean, there is so much money to be made on World that she should be
Yeah,
able to
maybe you're
purchase
okay.
10k aluminum, but it might
It's a
slow
bit
her.
risky, and Jim Bob can punish this if he wants to. He's got a little bit of cash, and he can play with that price of aluminum and maybe get himself a little bit of cash. But yeah, Vaempyress still with the 3 food, the 3 steel. That's going to do very nicely in the short term. Thank you
she
very much.
decided
She's already got 9,000 worth of food.
Bribe a claim and go immediately into an aluminum. And the only problem with this is if Jim Bob's paying attention, he can, with his, well, he just bought a bribe a claim.
He bought a claim as well.
Okay,
Yep.
both players deciding to go into a mutual detente over nukes at this point.
Yep, non-aggression pact. It's mutually assured destruction, so neither player going for that nuclear option. But Vaempyress is very far ahead. 28k in cash and resources, and most of that is the food, which she is very sensibly stockpiling. She can take the upgrade basically whenever she likes by selling all of that food down. And Jim Bob really trailing quite a lot.
Yeah, Jim Bob needs to figure out some way to slow down the scientist. Sure, the black market actually is not the greatest. That EM, the power surge, would only do 50% of the time on these farms, but at least that's 50%. What, 30 seconds that Vaempyress isn't making a lot of money?
Yeah, Jim Bob's found a market though. He's found the chem market, which are very, very profitable right now. 110 or thereabouts. Vaempyress buying up a bunch of carbon to try and punish that as best she can. So she's going to get a little bit of money from that too. But nonetheless, it's a very profitable market for Jim Bob as Vaempyress gets the very far away aluminum in the far north. That might just be a solar panel.
Yeah, it should be a solar panel. Power may have started cheap, but with all of these steel mills online for both of our players and the electrolysis reactors from Jim Bob, power has crept up pretty high, so Vaempyress in B debt needs to be thinking about debt mitigation. If she can keep her debt under control with this huge cash lead, she should be okay.
Yep, I think so. It's a little bit worrying though with the power price at 200. That is a high power price. And I wonder what she's going to be thinking to do something about that. Are there any geotherms nearby? I can't see any, so
Only
it might
one
have
on
to
the map.
be... Yeah, it might have to be some of those very expensive solar panels. She's got the silicon right there, so potentially that's something that she can do. But instead, going for the double glass, double reactor, they are going to be profitable, but I'm very, very concerned at this point about this level of debt. Already in 76,000, isn't going to be able to get power online until HQ4, and that is going to be a long, long time. She's probably going to be in D by the time she gets into that power.
Yeah, and Jim Bob's starting to make money with these moves into chems. Jim Bob also moving into double wind turbines. If, as Vaempyress, you're not going to go into debt, you should be using your black market power. You should at least be using your black market to knock off Jim Bob's power.
Yeah, and Vaempyress, as we mentioned, doing the sensible thing, I think, going into those 2 solar panels. She didn't quite let those glass kilns complete, so didn't have to pay the resources for them. And gets those 2 solar panels down just in the nick of time. Needs to protect them, though. No goons yet been purchased. Jim Bob sitting on that single power surge. The dynamite goes onto Jim Bob's wind turbine, but that power surge could wreak havoc.
That dynamite feels like a mistake. Both players know no goon squads have been purchased right now. EMPs are cheap. Go for the power surge, sorry. Power surges are cheap, shut down Jim's power for just under 90 seconds total. Instead, Vaempyress gets hit by the power surge, and her power's going to be off for 40-ish seconds, give or take.
And this is now very painful for Vaempyress. These steel mills consuming nearly $100 worth of power every single second they are ticking. And those solar panels shut down for another 20. Here's a pleasure dome auction, which isn't going to be very good in the short term. I guess whoever gets it is probably immediately going to turn it off. But,
yeah, Vaempyress can't afford to bid anymore on this.
No, this feels like a big overcommitment. 20k for this pleasure dome.
Fall into D debt here, and yes, she does.
It does drop her into that D level of debt. And really, really needs to protect those solar panels. It's very, very important at this point that Vaempyress gets that power online, because otherwise she's going to be taking D takes, and that is very, very painful. As a scientist, you don't really have a good way to get into power, certainly a large amount of power very quickly. And these solar panels, really, really valuable now for Vaempyress. She takes the upgrade. Jim Bob, in fact, buys a goon instead of attacking, and again, that feels like it's just a little bit too defensive. Jim Bob getting to HQ4 far before Vaempyress, but again, could have just driven that knife home with that power surge.
Right, 1v1. If you have the chance to attack, it is almost always a better idea to do it than go on the defensive. Vaempyress is moving into a 3rd solar panel and a food surplus, not what she wants to see.
Is that a 3rd solar panel? It's an elemental quarry.
Sorry.
I think she's moving into a geo,
quarry.
I think. And the geo is all the way across the map. She has gooned it, which will help a lot. But yeah, that was a large interest tick for Vaempyress. 27,500, and that puts her very firmly into that D level of debt that you really don't want to be in a 1v1, particularly against someone who's not a scientist. You want to be using that black market basically whenever you can. And again, there is another power surge on the solar panels, although it could maybe have been timed very slightly better, because it's still nighttime right now, but even so, that is going to be a painful power surge. Jim Bob as well, picking up that superconductor, denying it to Vaempyress. And again, that's going to make it even more difficult. Jim Bob now going for the kill. He might just have this one.
He very well might. Vaempyress needs a little bit more to defend herself. The problem is, nothing she's in right now is making too much money. She did turn her steel mills back on, but she hasn't purchased into herself. She decides that she's not going to be able to defend herself. Throws up the GG. Although,
yeah, I mean, it's not quite over, because Jim Bob isn't making a ton of money either, and his chems are off right now, but he surely is going to get there before Vaempyress is able to defend herself. Only really the reactor's doing anything for Vaempyress right now. Able to sell the steel down, so she got the cash for that, but needs another 30,000 or so if she's going to be able to defend herself. It feels like a tall order.
Yeah, tall order, unfortunately, for Vaempyress. Her biggest moneymaker right now is those solar panels, but that's paying off debt. It's not going into her pockets. Does throw a slowdown strike onto Jim Bob right on those the aluminum,
Yep,
which is a mistake,
on
but
the
also gets the
chems.
chems.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, there's the
Still
red
not
button for
enough.
Jim Bob. He takes game number 1. And, I mean, it was a good start for Vaempyress. She really got out of the blocks very quickly indeed, but just that debt, it didn't quite ever feel like it was under control for her, and she made a very late decision to go into those solar panels. And she really needed to be a bit more proactive about putting that power down and then protecting the power, which she didn't do at HQ3. She fell into that D level of debt, and from there it was very easy for Jim Bob just to pick up some very, very cheap stock indeed and end
Yes.
this game number 1.
Other thing that Vaempyress did that might have been a little bit of a mistake, she went into 3 farms, which gave her a lot of food money really quick. But since her opponent was a robot, the only food consumption was coming from the colony, which was consuming 0.84 food a second. So 3 farms, a little bit of an overcommitment. Maybe go into 2 farms, keep that farm market longer is a potential play. If you do decide to kill the market, you do need to have a plan of what to move into once that market is dead, and it didn't seem like Vaempyress had a plan and was a bit taken surprise when farms all of a sudden didn't make any money. That natural surplus didn't help at all either.
Yeah, there was a natural surplus in there, which really made life difficult for Vaempyress. But I mean, the power issue was, I mean, if she'd gone into power maybe a little bit earlier, it would just have been a bit easier to control that debt. And Jim Bob at the end of the game was, I think, making money off power as well. So again, that's some more things, just feeding Jim Bob all of that money and giving him ultimately game number 1. I was looking at the black market, and I think it is quite noticeable with these 2 players. I mean, the only things that were bought on the black market that were offensive items, Jim Bob getting 2 power surges, Vaempyress getting the 1 dynamite, and as you said, the dynamite should really have been a power surge because we knew there were no goons, so that would have been a much more effective shutdown onto Jim Bob's wind turbines. But those 2 power surges really, even against the scientist, really doing a lot and really cementing Jim Bob's position as the controller of this game.
Yeah, that Pleasure Dome didn't do anything for Vaempyress, making 0.2k.
Yeah, well, she turned it off. Well, I think the 0.2 was the two ticks before she turned it off after winning that auction. So yeah, it did literally nothing, and it consumed, I imagine, about 0.6 in power during that time as well. So definitely a net negative that she paid 20,000 for, something like that. It was quite a bit of money anyway.
Something a little bit too expensive.
Yeah, 20k
for it.
So there's game number 1. Should we move on to game number 2?
Yes. The only thing we can say about this one is kudos to Jim Bob for recognizing that chemicals were an untapped market. That and his early power plays brought him right back into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. The fuel very low, the carbon pretty low as well, and those chems were very good for a long time. It was a chem colony too, so it started high. It was being boosted by the colony, and that was some quick cash that Jim Bob really needed at that point in the game to catch up to Vaempyress, and he made that decision, and it was a very good one.